to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. Today I'm going to be doing a review of the Alpina Startimer Pilot Auto, and this watch here, an entry-level Swiss kind of dressy tool watch, pilot watch, versatile one watch, do-it-all watch. My first ever review, so we're looking forward to that. Oh, one thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of people who do wristwatch checks. I may as well start doing that. Today it's a Sunday afternoon and I'm in a nice casual day, so I'm enjoying myself with my orange pumpkin, the orange samurai. So it's a bit of my party, don't really have to do much dress up watch. A lot of fun for a weekend. Okay, so with no further ado, let's get back to the review of the Alpina Startimer Pilot Auto. So this is the Alpina Startimer Pilot Auto, reference AL525G4TS6. It's a pilot watch and a daily wearer watch, so it's trying to do almost everything at once in that entry-level Swiss market. So if we talk about the roles, as a pilot watch, what it needs to do is have supreme legibility and be accurate at a glance. As an everyday watch, it needs to be wearable and also have a little class, a little flair, and also be a little tough. So now let's look at how it fulfills those roles. Okay, as a pilot watch, the Alpina nails it. Let's be honest. That big flat dial means everything can be seen clearly, and that big flat crystal, as you can see, it is absolutely dead flat, maybe a tiny dome depending on how I hold it, means that there's essentially zero distortion. No matter what angle you look at this watch, you can usually get an impression of what the time is, or if it's at anything less than really extreme angles, you can tell exactly what the time is. So that's it. Helped along the way, in addition to those big flat surfaces, you've got these beautiful high contrast markers which are applied, so gives it an element of sort of three-dimensionality. Also with the silvering on the outside, it means that at various angles they really pop and shine. You can't miss what the time is. Finally, you've got long thin hands which manage to do two things at once. They both tell you exactly what the time is very easily, but also stay out of the way, so that it, unlike say snowflake hands or Mercedes hands, where you can see broadly where the hand is, but you're not sure exactly where it's pointing, and they often obscure things underneath. These hands definitely don't. You can definitely see exactly where they're pointing, whilst at the same time never obscuring a detail of the watch. Then you've got finally a big and easy to use crown, which is, as you can see, dead easy to undo and dead easy to screw back up again. So that's from a pilot's point of view. How about from a wearability perspective? Now we'll deal with the I've got to say elephant in the room first. Frankly, it's a massive watch. 44 millimeters across, 52 millimeters long, and surprisingly only 10 millimeters thick. I've got to get the Zulu band out of the way. Only 10 millimeters thick, which is actually a surprisingly thin watch. What that means is it has a lot of wrist presence. It really does stand out on the wrist. I have a 7.5-inch wrist, and you can see it takes up an awful lot of that space. Having said that, Alpina has got very good at playing tricks to make large watches very wearable. The first is, notice that the lugs are at the lug attachments are extremely aggressively profiled downwards, and the lugs are situated at the very base of the case, even potentially, even if I measured it, maybe even under the case. And what that means is you get a watch that really wraps around your wrist. So even though it's quite long, it uses every inch of the wrist it can. Also being quite thin, even with a Zulu underneath, it doesn't tend to bob around. It doesn't tend to move around on the wrist. It sits nice and flat. So they've used lots of tricks to get an otherwise large watch to fit a wide array of people. But that said, at the end of the day, it's a 42 by 52 millimeter watch. There's a lot of people who simply aren't going to be able to wear this. Now let's look at it from the point of view of a little bit of class. It's got this deep blue grey dial, which really sets it apart from the normal black you see in this space. And I think it does give it that a little element of class. So likewise, nice simple fonts. They haven't tried to get carried away by being clever or smart. And I think what that means is that it's a dial that can be used in a variety of settings without looking out of place. There's excellent date integration. The date is there, easily read, but also subtle and vanishes when you don't want to see it, which I think is the perfect idea for a date. Finally, the subtle case shaping. It's not just, the lugs aren't just stuck on the side like a lot of welded lugs or lugs which are just almost designed to look like they're welded on. There is this subtle shaping around the entire case, giving it a little bit less tool-tastic, but also a little bit more dressy, a bit more versatility in how it looks. Okay, finally, you've got quite a nice, let me get this out, quite a nice printed case, quite a nice finished case back, quite pretty, well finished, kind of classy. As always, every piece of information you'd ever want to know printed around the outside. There are a couple of problems. I'd like a little bit less printing on the dial. We don't need to be told it's automatic. We don't need to be told that there's 100 meters water resistance. We don't necessarily even need to be told that Alpina has been around since 1883 and originates from Geneva. I don't think there's a need to put all that on the dial, and I would have preferred not to have it all. The caseback's nice, but given what this is, an entry-level watch, often it could be someone's first automatic. Even though there's nothing special about the movement, a display caseback may have worked well. I think the biggest issue is the lug-to-lug length. It's a 21 millimeter. Now, as you can see, I've kind of squeezed a 22 onto this. It means that there's a little bit of pinching at the side. It probably, if I measured it, would be 21.5 millimeters. So ideally it would have been a straight out 22 would be better, but it is a 21 and it can be tricky getting third-party bands onto this watch. In terms of a little bit of flair, pretty much all good. There's the silvering around the edges of the numbers, the silvering on the edges of the hands, the little subtle beveling on the sides with the mix of brushing and polishing on the sides of the case, the polished bezel up against the brushed mid case. All of these things are small. They don't scream at anyone. They don't make it a shouty watch, but they do give it just that little bit of flair and lift it above your standard Fliegers that you might see in this kind of range normally. Finally, about being a little bit tough. 316L steel, sapphire crystal, screw down case back, screw down crown, all of that giving 100 meters water resistance. Frankly, it's almost the perfect Goldilocks position in terms of toughness. Not too soft, not too hard, not too many compromises made either way. It is probably bang on what you'd expect in the specs there. So that's the design point of view. Now, what about from execution? The first choice any manufacturer has to make in execution is what movement are we going to use? This tells me, Alpina will tell us that we've got an AL525. They'll also say quite clearly in their own publications that that's a Sellita SW200 base movement, and that is a perfect choice for an entry-level Swiss watch. Tough, reliable, accurate, easily serviceable, but still, at the end of the day, Swiss. Quite frankly, what more can you ask for? The band, well, I've moved it onto a NATO band. I love NATOs. That's not a comment about the original band. That's just what I prefer. The original band is a black suede material, very similar finish to this actually, with white stitching. It's perfectly serviceable. Actually fits this kind of do-it-all. It's not overly dressy. You can wear it casually, but it's not overly casual. You can wear it as a dress watch too. It's a nice compromise. I just love my NATOs, so it's always going to get removed. Build, I can't fault it. Everything is clean. Everything is crisp. Everything is neat. Everything is perfectly aligned. Just the way the indices sort of pop off the dial, the little subtle hints like the silvering on the edges of the indices, the silvering on the edge of the hands, lift everything up, give it the appearance of a build far in excess of its marketplace. And actually, it's difficult to imagine for this price range what else they could have done to better execute this design. Which really, if there's one, or actually there's two tiny quibbles, is the action of the screw down crown is a little rough. Obviously, they haven't spent omega levels of money in things like the internal threads of the crown. Also, I would have loved to have seen drilled lugs. But then on the other hand, that's a criticism I can probably level at almost every watch I'm going to review in my lifetime. Unfortunately, they seem to be quite rare. So where does this put us in the marketplace? Okay, so I said before, entry-level Swiss. This has a MSRP of just a tick over $1,000 US. I think it's $1,050 US. You will almost never pay that much. Obviously, very easily available on the secondary market through places like Joma Shop for around about $650 US. I have seen, and in fact right now, if you buy this through another store, you could get this for $500 US. That puts it in a price range where there's almost no alternatives, but there are some that you would look at in place of this. The obvious alternative to this kind of pilot-inspired dress watch is the Oris Big Crown Pro Pilot. Now, its MSRP is around about $1,700. You can pick those up from places like Joma Shop for about $1,200. It's got some clear advantages over this. Oris is a better known name than Alpina. It's a simpler watch. It doesn't have some of the flair, some of the dress characteristics of this. That may suit you. So it's more tooly, and it's certainly smaller. At 41 millimeters, it will fit a larger range of people. Some of the not so obvious choices, Larco, Stover, a whole bunch of people make kind of these entry-level to mid-level Flieger watches. In almost every case, you're going to find that they're much simpler dials, much simpler designs. They're going to be much more tooly, less versatile, less likely to also do duty as like a dress watch, a business watch, that sort of thing. There's the Hamilton Khaki Pilot. Now that's certainly at the price range of this, but again is still much more tooly and much more Flieger-like than this watch. Finally, probably the most obvious, a closer example in terms of more the multi-use dress and pilot watch would be something like the Zin 556. It's probably even less of a straight-out pilot's watch, although that's what Zin calls it, with only, I think it's only got numbers at the 12, 3, 6 and 9. The rest are indices. But at the same time, it has an even, whilst being less of a pilot's watch, it's got even more of a tool-like aesthetic with less polishing, much more brushing and kind of an industrial finish. It's significantly more expensive. It's going to cost you around about $1,000 US. But on the other hand, it's a Zin, so it's going to carry a fair bit of weight. If you really wanted to find the most obvious or the most likely alternative to this, I would suggest you look at the Fortis range. Now, the Fortis range has got some interesting, nothing exactly like this, but a few watches up and about and around it. So you've got the Flieger, which is much more likely a Type A, Type B type watches. They also have a cockpit, which is very similar to this, a little bit less dressed up and a little bit less polished, but a very similar concept. And finally, not actually from their instrument range, but not dissimilar, would be their Spacematic. So if you really were keen on a watch like this, but there's something about the Alpina, especially its size, that didn't suit you, then I'd really recommend looking at the Fortis line, probably either the Cockpits or the Spacematics. So the takeaway, in terms of roll satisfaction, for me, with a 7.5-inch wrist, this watch is almost perfect. As a bigger guy, it's a brilliant blend of the two roles of being both a sports watch and an everyday watch, and I do tend to use this as something of an everyday watch. It's clearly a pilot's watch, but with lots of little tweaks to lift it out of the Flieger crowd and make it a watch that you could wear quite comfortably with a business suit to work every day for the rest of your life. Which brings me to the execution. It's beautifully executed, wonderfully built, and will last you the rest of your life, especially given that workhorse movement, which is both extremely reliable, but were anything to go wrong, frankly, you could either have the movement worked on, or even, worst case scenario, replaced relatively easily at pretty much any watchmaker in the world. The only real concern for me in this watch would be the size. If the watch doesn't fit, despite all the tricks that have been played with aggressively shaped lugs, placing the lugs at the extreme base of the case, making the case itself extremely thin so it doesn't rock around, those are all tricks which Alpina has played to make this open to as many people as possible. But at the end of the day, if you have a smaller wrist, and I'm going to guess if it was probably 6.5 inches or smaller, you may struggle to get this on your wrist comfortably, and in which case it's simply not for you. In terms of its competitors, it stacks up really well in terms of design, execution, and price, with pretty much anything else in this price segment, or frankly even above it. I think this thing, even though you can buy it for $500 to $600 US, I would be perfectly comfortable matching this watch against anything that costs twice or even 3 times the amount. It's a serious value proposition, which I really, if it fits, I would recommend this to anyone. So that's it for the Alpina Startimer Pilot Auto. Highly recommend it as long as it fits. Okay, so that's it, the Alpina Startimer Pilot Auto, a fantastic dressy tool watch, pilot watch, do-it-all one watch. I love this. This is actually the watch that got me personally into Alpina. It is the reason I now own 7 Alpinas, I think. So 2 reasons for telling you that. 1, I really do love this watch. 2, maybe I'm a little biased about the brand. Maybe you should be careful about what I just said, but I honestly and truthfully could not recommend this more highly, as long as it fits. So anyway, that's it for me. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe. I think I've probably got myself and my mother watching at the moment. It would be great if more of you did. Thank you very much.